Morning.
Morning.
How are you?
I'm pretty good.
Alright, so for people that don't know, I'm here with Jonathan Reekie, the director of Somerset House. I just told you who he is and his title, but I think, can you tell us what that title really means? Like, what does the director of Somerset House do and who is Jonathan Reekie?
Well, sometimes I playfully say that means I do everything and nothing.
I can believe that.
Fundamentally responsible for the vision and the strategy of Somerset House and making sure that all the things are in place that are needed to fulfill our function as a charity.
Mm-hmm.
We're here for the public benefit.
This place is the 8th most visited destination in the country, and it has 3 million visitors a year. Like, what is that like, being a public benefit for so many people? What is it like to be one of the most visited places on the land? Like, what does that mean as such a premier place to be?
Well, everybody uses Somerset House in different ways, and obviously we are slap bang in the centre of the city. It's a very porous site. There are lots of ways to get into Somerset House from the north, south, east and west. So I mean, that's part of why it's such a visited place. And the courtyard behind us is a beautiful courtyard created in the late 18th century, which is really one of London's most beautiful public spaces. And it's a public space.
Thank you.
We're in Poons, so we're about to be served some delicious oolong tea.
I'm grateful for this.
Our host, Michael Mackenzie. Thank you.
So the joy about Poons is that this site we're in was really quiet for about a year or two, right? And then Poons has come in and...
Poons is one of the latest arrivals to Somerset House's food and drink offer, and we're very pleased and very proud to have it here. Highly recommended.
I agree. Like, they
Chinese family cooking.
I had the Amy Won't Die on a Hill 2 nights ago. It's a, believe it or not, it's a prawn toast. They're fighting if they should put a traditional prawn toast on the menu, and if it should be the Britified version or the classic version, and they chose the classic version. It's actually really tasty, so do come and visit. Somerset House as a charity is 25 years old. I've been here for maybe 6 years, but Somerset House as a charity is 25 years old. And
well, technically, it's been a charity for longer, but we opened to the public 25 years ago.
Okay, the difference is...
but when we opened to the public, most of the site was still occupied by civil servants and government departments, because for most of the history of this building, it was home for the civil service.
I find that such an interesting relationship, because this was the home of the civil service, and now we are in a world where for Somerset House to exist is actually independent without government funding.
Yeah, so specifically we're sitting in offices in a room that was occupied by HMRC. So this is the tax office. But rather amazingly, the government had this beautiful building. They decided that it wasn't suitable for a modern civil service. And rather than just flogging it, they decided to set up a cultural and art space. And that's how the Somerset House Trust happened. Yeah, so we opened to the public in 2000, but then it was a very slow evolution. The final civil servants left this building where we are now in 2012.
Okay.
So we're not even 25 years old in some ways.
There's a way to describe that, but I don't have the words, but it's the mix of a teenager and a young adult and running free in society.
Yeah, I sometimes call Somerset House a kind of teenager wearing their grandparents' clothing.
I can believe that, especially when you look downstairs.
Yeah, exactly.
So, no government funding, but a government awarded building. And it's been 25 years, give or take. And we've done some really remarkable things here. But I realize no institution, no organization operates by themselves, right? And I also believe this idea of being fiercely independent is a lie. But I think about interdependence a lot, like,
Yeah.
and the different relationships the different long-term relationships that we have and how we hold them together to make us thrive. I'm really keen to hear what you think about interdependence as an idea, especially to articulate some aspects that drive your model to keep this place going.
Yeah, I really like your phrase, fiercely interdependent. I might start using it.
Please feel free and credit me in the process.
Yeah, I mean, no, absolutely. And I mean, there are a lot of interesting things about Somerset House, but as we were saying, it was established as a kind of art and cultural space, but without a plan. So we've had to kind of make a plan as we've gone along. And one of the key parameters was that we weren't going to get regular government funding. So from the start, we had to figure out how we could be financially independent. And key part of that for the Somerset House Trust is that we have to look after this amazing piece of architectural history, 500,000 square feet of Grade 1 listed
It's a huge
building,
place.
so it's huge. So we have a responsibility, a legal responsibility, to look after this building, and we have to find enough money to maintain it and make it open to the public. So we're independent in that sense, but what you're alluding to, quite rightly, is that in order to do that, there are a huge number of interdependencies and partnerships.
That really make it go.
And that's, yeah, like you say, that's the kind of beating heart of what Somerset House is.
I've been here a while now, so I've got to participate and contribute. And like, this place is an ecosystem. It's not just a venue, right? And Somerset House hosts artists and creative businesses and cultural organizations and global brands all under one roof. Like, you go from downstairs, you see people like Saul Nash. We have got the Booker Prize Award upstairs. Which Booker Prize do we have upstairs?
Yeah.
And so, like, we have these cultural defining moments, artists, creatives, all here, all producing. And what I would love to understand is, like, how intentional has that been? Was this designed? How intentional was this ecosystem development? Because it's such a wonderful thing and it's so difficult to recreate. I've not seen it many places else. You've traveled the world to say how independently brilliant it is. What goes into that?
Well, it's been very intentional, but having said that, we've arrived at this model through a series of experiments over 25 years. So I wouldn't claim that there was a kind of an initial vision that has led us to where we are today. So there've been a lot of experiments, really.
Can you talk about that experimental culture? Because, like, I think sometimes you might see institutions as a pinnacle and almost like a place to herald what we already knew was great. And it's to say, they finally reached the top of the mountain. But in your experimentations, you've taken bets on people like me. You've taken bets on Paul Smythe. You've taken bets on people like Larry Champong. Like, Somerset House has taken bets on leading multidisciplinary, diverse sets of artists, even seen in Talent 25, right? And what goes into that thought of, we're going to experiment, we're going to take this leap, we're going to make this jump and see what happens? What drives that?
It's driven by, fundamentally by a desire to support creativity in the best way we can. But to arrive at that point, as I've said, has been quite a kind of long and slightly winding journey, because there are always in our model there's a spectrum, and there are two things that are in tension with each other. One is the need to be financially independent, and then at the other end of the spectrum, the desire to support this country's best creatives in the best way we can. And those two things have to work together. And I describe it as a tension. Some people would say they're in conflict with each other. I don't really see it like that. And I think the whole world of creativity anyway is a spectrum that kind of goes from the very commercial at one end to the very experimental, progressive at the other end. And that ecosystem needs both. to thrive.
We were reasoning about this recently when we were working on submission, right? We were asking ourselves, what is a creative business? And what is a creative business that thrives here at Somerset House? What is creative tech? Is that going to be the future? These are all conversations at hand. And I understand you when you say there's a tension, because it's almost, how do you marry the provision we have and what we have to what is available to support outside?
Yeah, I mean, tension can be a good thing. Difficulty can be really positive. But yeah, we've developed over a long period of time different aspects of that ecosystem, and we've to make life more manageable, we've sort of basically divided it into 4 groups. There are at one end the SMEs that are roughly between 4 people and 50 people. Most of them are commercial, but not all of them. There are quite a few charities as well, and they are nearly all within the creative industries. Fundamentally, for us, we've got this huge building. We have an obligation to make it an artistic and creative space and to make it for the public benefit. So basically what we've chosen to do is to make as much of this space as possible a kind of vessel, if you like, for that ecosystem. So the most of what we're providing is space. And by providing space at scale to different people within the creative ecosystem, we're also providing a community and kind of professional support. And I think one of the things that's very noticeable about the creative sector is it's mostly very small organisations or individuals, and it's pretty lonely out there.
It is.
So the power of being able to fill a building with people who are part of that ecosystem, I think is huge. And what we have to do really is just to do the best job we can to make sure the best and the right people are in the building. And we can do that to a greater or larger extent, depending on which part of the ecosystem it is. But certainly with the artists, we're really intentional about which artists do we think will benefit from being here, looking at their practice, looking at their trajectory, and also taking the community view. So with the artists especially, a real feature of Somerset House Studios is its interdisciplinarity, both artists working across different disciplines, but also working within different disciplines. So for example, of those 72 artists, we don't only want to have one kind of visual artist. We want that to be a diverse group, diverse in every way, diverse in practice, diverse in lived experience, whatever. So there's a process there to wherever we can choose the right people to be here, choose the people that will benefit from being here, choose the people that will thrive.
So over the years, I've had the opportunity to see so many different art spaces, but that a lot of the things you describe as reasons why I don't leave, right? It is the opportunity to have some of the world's best at the same place that you go to work. It is that's when you do social impact and and you work in small business, it can be lonely and isolating, and here you are plugged into one of the largest networks in the country. It is the fact that you don't know who you might meet, and next thing you know, you might go on a journey to build something extraordinary. Those things are like really profound experiences to have. And it's almost like, because so many people are here, that serendipity factor happens again and again and again.
Exactly.
It happens very often. And so that's so enjoyable, but I sometimes think it's like, when I think about Somerset House, it's almost like holding up the heavens, for creativity for me anyway. And I'm like, oh, what goes into keeping that going? It's almost like the job of Atlas, but finance, mechanics, production, human resources, not even human resources, pastoral care is a better articulation of that, because small businesses and artists and creators have an emotional need as much as a physical one. How does Somerset House go about helping sustain that? I know we've spoken about some of our relationships. I know we speak about how we leverage the building and our space, but what things that we don't see that go into maybe keeping that alive or keeping this alive?
Well, you don't see a small-ish, very dedicated, very hard-working team of people who are really kind of behind this vision. And then what you don't see are all those kind of conversations and all the thinking that goes into creating the right balance between the financial imperative and the creative desire. So I mean, it's an analogy is it's a bit like having a huge sound deck at the back of a gig, and you're constantly
working the room.
Working the room. You're constantly adjusting it. You can put a bit more here, a bit less there. So it works like that. I mean, it's quite dark and mysterious. I'm not sure any of us fully understand it. And it's something we've developed, over 25 years.
But I guess that's it, year after year. So I run a small independent organization. I've raised sponsorship before. Year after year is a fraught experience to keep going, right? And this is a smallish team at really an international scale, because it's not just UK we compare ourselves to here. What drives it? Is it the fact that we get people to recommit to loving and coming and seeing us again and again and again? Is it the fact that our partnerships are so great that they just seem to carry us forward for years at a time? Like, I know you say it's a dark art, but like...
Yeah, I mean, everything's constantly shifting. And so we have to constantly shift with it. And I think a really important part of it, a really important part of the success, I would say, is listening to all the people in the building. I think listening is a very underrated skill in this respect. So we have a building full of amazing people doing amazing things, and if we listen to those people and what their needs are, we can do a better job. But I don't want to also exaggerate what we can do, because at the end of the day, what we can do is offer a space, a safe space, and we can help shape that community so that the community can nurture and nourish itself. But there's a hell of a lot we can't do. And I think there are people who come into our ecosystem and get frustrated. I don't want to exaggerate what we can do. It's in a way, it's a vessel. There's a big part of what we do that's quite passive. We're trying to create the conditions for people to do really well in whatever they want to do. How do you support people?
Yeah.
How can you actively support people?
How can you really support people? Not, here's a mentorship program. More, this is love, care, and education to double your income. Because creative practice is so hard.
Yeah. Well, we've got to be clear about what we can and can't do. But quite a few years ago, we recognised that the real problem of underrepresentation in the creative sector was perhaps something we could attempt over a long period of time to try and improve. So we started to be more active around creative careers. We created a program called Upgrade Yourself, which brings sort of 18 to 30-year-olds into the sector, or provides entry routes into the sector with a particular focus on underrepresentation. And then we've also in recent years, and you've given one example, the Black Business Residencies, started to actively provide support for other creative businesses who, for different reasons, might need or might benefit from a sort of more proactive interventionist form of support.
We need to come for lunch next time, because I think filming is like good, but I'm smelling the food and it's amazing.
Yeah, no, exactly.
For creative careers, I think we crossed paths over creative careers, across the creative careers part, and the Upgrade Yourself specifically, because
That's where I met
Pandemic,
you
yeah.
online. I met you online.
Pandemic 2020, or was it 2021?
I think it was 20, I don't know, 20.
Pandemic?
No, maybe 21. It's all a
No,
blur.
it's all a blur. I'll call it Pandemic 2020, and I remember I was doing M&C Saatchi Saturday School, and I was teaching the communities the basics of business, and we launched Upgrade Yourself, and it was just like, the skills you need to survive in a climate that's so uncertain. And I
Yeah.
thought that was such an interesting remedy, because it was asking creatives from within the community to offer in their skills
Exactly.
and share, and it was
And
a
that-
peer learning platform for me, and I enjoyed that the most.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that, one of the things we can do when we're thinking about who should be in the building and who shouldn't be in the building, one of the questions we ask is, are you willing to actively contribute to this community? So you're a really good example. You were here doing your,
I was running
your business, and you did a brilliant online film for young people about how to get in the creative industries. And so that's a very, very easy example of how we can leverage the community and the network that we've got in the building.
That is really interesting about that serendipity factor, right? So being able to do that one event in Somerset House that year helped me exceed all of the KPIs I needed for my sponsorship package that year that I was working with M&C Saatchi. And I think that's the serendipity I'm talking about, where these things collide here and they produce such amazing outcomes for so many others. And that would never have happened if I didn't meet, I've forgotten the producer's name that was working on it. He's a lecturer now. But there was a lecturer working on Upgrade Yourself, the first round. And he did so well in production, made everyone feel so comfortable, helped everyone deliver it so well.
I mean, you're
Never
right.
done without him.
Yeah, you're right using the word serendipity in a sense, but I think the thing about serendipity, I mean, if you create any community or you take any community, whether it's, for example, a village or a town, and I mean, you could compare Somerset House to a village or a town.
It's that scale, yeah.
And you have our courtyard is our, the town square, if you like.
Yep.
We create the conditions, the physical conditions for people to meet. And so it is serendipity, but it's a kind of stage managed serendipity, I suppose.
Somerset House is an international cultural platform, and it takes advantage of being a place where people can meet and then shows the world everything it has to say. But it also sits in the heart of London. It also has a role to play to the local community. I would love to understand and hear how we balance that international ambition with our local responsibilities. And the reason why I'm interested in you in this question is because I've seen the work you've done on North Bank, right? I've seen the work you've done on the Strand. I've seen the work you do. I see you collaborate with other institutional partners in the local area. I'm keen to learn, how does this all play off into Somerset House being what it is?
Yeah, I mean, I see them being part of the same thing. I mean, the great thing about London is a global city that is made up of myriad small communities, many of which have reach and links, all around the world. So, I mean, the beautiful thing about London is it is a global city and a series of villages at the same time. So I think that's what, that's where our energy is. So I think they're entirely complementary. I don't think about them differently. And by dint of our location, which is the sort of geocentric centre of London, I think it's somewhere out on the pavement, on the embankment.
Okay.
It moves over time as London
Gets bigger
and develops. There's been a lot of development in the east of London in recent years. So the centre of London has shifted a few hundred metres to the east.
I never actually thought about that. The centre of London shifts as we get big. Of course, it's true, but
Depends how you calculate it, but yes.
That's a round one. When you learn something, it throws you off your train of thought. I want the centre of London to be in south. Can we build southwards, please, for everyone investing? My question then becomes, how does this play a role in the programming we choose to put on? We've done soil, we've done salt, we have a salts there, we've got an exhibition out right now, we've done things that speak on migration, we've got such a prolific programming muscle here, right? And you say it, Somerset House is represented in its global local position just naturally, and it's what we produce is complementary. But yeah, how does that play a role in this programming? How do we choose what's next? How does that?
Well, I think there are kind of two things going on there. One is that we are a centre for contemporary culture. And that's a choice. Somerset House did start in 2000 trying to be a museum, in fact. But we're a centre for contemporary culture now, which means we want to engage, we want our cultural programme to be engaging in the big issues of our time. And then at the same time, we've got a building full of artists, makers and creatives who reflect in different ways the big issues of our time, because they're also, most of them are individually engaged in those same issues. So at the same time as us sort of looking outward and thinking about what our programme might be, and what are the key contemporary trends or issues that we can engage with in our programme, at the same time we've got a building with some really amazing creative people who are telling us some of the same stories, making some of the same suggestions. So I think uniquely the programme here both happens in the sort of more traditional curatorial model where there's someone senior and experienced who knows the world, who's sort of thinking about what the programme might be, and then at the same time there's a kind of grassroots bottom-up element. We're listening to the artists in the building, interested in what they're doing, and the two things collide. So a lot of our programme is now created by people who are in the building.
I enjoy that because I know it's true, and I've had an opportunity to not just benefit but participate in delivering on what that might be. And I respect the authenticity of the way we go about it, because it's not smooth sailing all the time.
No.
But the creative tension between us as we do it, and the shared ambition and goal of we really want to do good for the people that we've chosen to serve, has kept at least us and Somerset House on a really long-term relationship to make some real good and some real impact. And I want to thank you for that,
Well, that's very kind, but I think the thanks has to go to all the amazing people in the building.
I definitely agree, because there has been some amazing contributors to this journey and this story, but I think about how many other places would have opened their doors repeatedly, not just to me, but to others, to make such impact across the region. And I haven't seen many others who have such an appetite for change.
Well, our model is pretty unique. And some of that comes from the building and, the special set of circumstances that we've been handed. And then some of that comes from the sort of intentionality of thinking, well, what can we, Somerset House, do in the city, in an amazing city that's full of creativity, full of creative life, full of creative institutions? What could we do that's a bit different? What gap needs filling? How could we fill it? And the gap in this case is what you're talking about. It's about creating a really vibrant, energetic, safe, creative space that can celebrate creativity in all its forms and not get hung up about trying to do one thing, like being artist studios or being a maker space or being a creative co-working space, because the world and creativity in particular is much messier than that. There's loads of mess going on. There's loads of
crossing borders and boundaries and
exactly. There's lots of grey area, and I think Somerset House loves kind of occupying the grey space.
I would dare to say we've chosen the radical path of being a cultural institution. because there might have been easier ways to be, especially if you chose something simpler.
Yeah.
But the world's biggest companies still choose to partner with Somerset House, right? You've had Virgin back-to-back for years. You've had Morgan Stanley back-to-back for years, American Express, so on, so on, so on. I was in the courtyard earlier today, last year, and we had Dior and Versace back-to-back or something ridiculous. We've had Ferrari sit outside. Brands still choose Somerset House time and time again. And is it exactly what you described that they also see? Or do they see another special quality that just under the surface that just makes it make sense for them, or a no-brainer for them? What is that factor?
Well, I think it's all of those things. Different businesses, different brands want different things, but we haven't really talked about the audience, and I think that's one of the key drivers for corporate partnerships. In describing this Centre for Contemporary Creativity, that inevitably brings a kind of really particular and exciting energy to the building, brings a slightly younger, maybe slightly more diverse audience, depending on what it is. And I think corporates and brands are really hungry to engage with that audience.
So when we say 3 million people a year, we're not just assuming it's just the usual, almost museum cultural file art lover that goes to see things. You're suggesting that this audience is...
Well, they're coming here for lots of reasons. They're coming here because they're meeting someone in the creative industries. They're coming here to see an exhibition. They're coming here to play in the fountains in the courtyard in the summer. They're coming to Poons to have a delicious meal. There are a lot of reasons to visit here. It's not just cultural. But everyone who comes here, of course, gets to appreciate the amazing architecture and heritage of the site. It's a beautiful building.
So, I had the privilege of celebrating Somerset House's 25th birthday with you. And celebrating its sustainable cultural presence in London and what it's done and how many lives it's touched. Looking ahead, how do we think we should evolve this for the next generation? There's so much funding going into young people. There's so many people doing career shifts. There's so many people starting their creative practice after a life of something else. There's so much need and demand for art and creativity in the world where things are getting really serious outside.
Yeah, it's very precarious.
What do you see our role to be during this time?
I think we keep doing what we do. We create this vibrant, safe space. I think we keep listening, keep evolving through that listening process, trying to, wherever we can, support people as much as possible. But as I say, I'm always conscious about all the things we can't do. But I wouldn't pretend to know what the world's going to look like in 25 years' time. But I think the people I would want to listen to in terms of what does the future hold are the artists and the creatives. And of course the building's full of them, and I have the joy of bumping into them in the corridor every day of the week.
The last question I want to talk about, or not last question, is this last idea that I want to raise and have a discussion about, is this idea of a sustainable creative career. All the things that we've spoken about Somerset House doing is to create an environment to afford thousands of others this opportunity to practice their creativity safely and live really great lives whilst doing it, right? What are going to be the things that we need to protect to give more and more people the opportunity to have, or to keep people? What are the things that we have to protect to give people the opportunity to still have sustainable creative careers in a time where a lot of things are changing and a lot of the fundamentals are changing of how we do creative business?
Yeah, I mean, we can't guarantee sustainable careers. We can just do the best we can with what we've got to maximize the chances of a sustainable career. I wish we could do more. It'd be great. Yeah, there are massive changes taking place. I mean, there are quite a lot of people in this building who are worried about, is AI going to mean I still have a job? I would say there are probably less people in the building like this who have to worry about that than perhaps in a law firm. But nevertheless, it's there. AI is being used for some creative tasks nowadays. Does that mean some kinds of, for example, a graphic designer, will they have less work in the future? I don't know, but we can just we can do what we can to make it as easy as possible and as sustainable as possible. But ultimately, that's limited.
Thank you. So I guess for me, and thanks for participating in the first visual essay that I'm writing for this thing. The idea of wanting to make societal values was the fact that I really wanted to explore the topics which moved us, the topics which we cared about across art, culture, and business, because I believe they run such a huge part of society and they have such a force, even though they runs as an undercurrent.
That when they're all interrelated too.
When you start naming them and when you start articulating those things out loud, you get to have more opportunity to explore what's next. And so as we go out and think about new programs for the future, as we go out and think about new businesses, and as we go out and think about what does the world need, I think having these conversations are so insightful. So I just want to give you a sincere thank you, and thank you for a contribution to my creative career, because I recognized I have asked you time and time and again to support my endeavors, and you've rarely said no. And you showed up every time and really helped me along. From we started in BBR and you've given me Diana to work, or you give me an opportunity to work with Diana, to you writing my reference for me to go to school. I've got a sincere gratitude for you.
No, well, don't be silly. I mean, it's the best thing about this job and the best thing about this place is it's full of people like you who make the world go around, make the world a better place. That's fundamentally what it's all about.
Well, perfect. I think we're done.
Good.
Appreciate your time.
Yeah.